Welcome to another edition of Hacker Heroes, a segment where we explore the stories behind the hackers in our community. Dave Vitale, a prominent figure in the hacking community, has robust background in offensive security and an extensive career spanning various facets of the industry. Dave brings a wealth of knowledge and strategic insights to our discussion. Stay tuned, Dave Vitale, coming up next. This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where exploits run wild, packets aren't the only things getting sniffed, and the cocktails flow steady. It's Paul's Security Weekly.
Haroon Meer, welcome to Hacker Heroes.
Thank you very much for having me.
Dude, it's good to have you on the show. It's good to talk with you. We haven't talked in so long.
It's been a while. You've been busy.
Yeah, we both keep pretty busy. Keep us out of trouble. Usually. Usually.
Yeah, mostly it works.
Where do you live? Carl?
Cape Town, South Africa.
And you've been there your whole life?
So I did a brief stint out of the country, but yeah, fundamentally we South African. We like being a South African company. Before this, I was SensePost and also happily a South African company. So yep, that's us. That's home.
What was it like growing up around technology in South Africa? Right? Like, cause I feel like I'm ignorant to like that part of the world.
No, it's a super good question. So I grew up at the tail end of apartheid, and the only reason that's interesting for that discussion point is that South Africa was sanctioned, so we weren't really a part of the rest of the world, and so for lots of those things, South Africa developed its own local technology back then, or had its own local technology companies that in some ways were really good. So like in the States, you guys had the Apache. South Africa built its own clone of it called the Roy Falk. Like we had so South Africa had like a huge arms industry. And of course, none of that was good. It was because we were fighting an unjust war here and with our neighbors. But it had some of those benefits. And then technology-wise, for us, what was interesting is we'd see the rest of the world. Like you'd see the States on TV and you'd see technology progress, but we were still isolated. So I remember as a kid watching hints of phone freaks on TV and trying some of that stuff, but it wouldn't work for us because we didn't have tone dialing, for example. And then when I got to university, we discovered the internet, and the thing that was lucky was that was about the same time that the World Wide Web was just kicking off. So I got to discover it on the university networks at the same time that most people were experiencing it in the world. So we weren't stuck far behind.
Yeah. So you were in college. You were in college in the 90s. We were probably around the same age.
Yeah, exactly right. So around 94, I got to university, flunked out of ComSci. It was ridiculous.
No.
It was the most embarrassing.
Haroon Meer telling you flunked out of ComSci.
No, it was an incredible fail in first year. So I went to first year of university. I played a lot of pool.
Yeah, there you go.
Like that's all I did. And I got to the first semester exams, and I don't know if you'll have it in the States, but you have to have a certain passing grade on tests taken during the semester to qualify for the semester. So here it's called a DP. You've got to have this DP score. And so I strolled in ready to write the exam, and the people say like, "Oh, what's your DP?" And I'm like, "Well, what's a DP?" And they say, "No, you've got to have above like 40% to be able to write." And I'm like, "Well, I only wrote one test out of 11, so I don't think I'm gonna have it." So yeah, it was a horrible, like I went to the department saying, "Listen, I didn't know about this, but like I'll pass the tests." Like first semester ComSci was still Pascal and maths, and I knew the stuff and I knew I could pass it. and like it was like boy meets university.
Yeah. So you self-taught hacker programmer, back in the day kind of thing?
So yeah, so like I learned Pascal programming like in school, high school we discovered Pascal.
Me too.
And
Yeah.
like I was good at it.
Yeah.
Yes, now you know.
That was the language you learned in high school in the early 90s. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly right. And so like I was pretty good at it. I was pretty comfortable with it. But yeah, so I got kicked out of first semester comp science, and then I had to convince my parents that I wasn't a complete waste. So I took a job at the university in their computer services department. And fortunately, like they had tons of computers.
That was the place. Yeah.
Exactly.
To get
Initially, it was
computers
a
and internet.
part-time
Yes.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, and nobody was maintaining the Unix systems. I didn't know Unix then, but they had these beautiful Sun Sparks and HPs, but nobody was adminning them. And so...
No. I'm sure someone was admitting them. They just weren't on campus, right? They were somewhere else.
Lots of people were admitting them. Yeah, exactly right. No, so I ended up I took a full-time job with them, which made my degree free. And so then I studied lots of random stuff.
Yes.
And eventually got my comp science degree also. But like I stayed there for 10 years just learning everything on the campus networks. And it was awesome. Like it was a great way to learn lots of stuff without going to jail.
Isn't it though? Yeah. I spent 7-ish years at the university, and it's a playground. I mean, for learning, right? But like being involved with those systems, especially in that time.
It was great. Yeah, it was absolutely great. So at the time, Novell networks were all the hotness, and so I learned the Novell stuff. And like I say, there were few, back then they were called certified Novell engineers. But like there were people who did that, but nobody touched the Unix system. So like the DNS systems were a black hole, and so they just let me play on it as a kid because nobody else would touch it. And so I got to cut my teeth on all of that stuff. They had a Firewall 1 running on Sun Solaris. And so I basically got to learn on all of those systems, for almost 10 years, just figuring out new stuff. And it was great.
And then, did you go to SensePost right after that?
Yeah, so I left them to join SensePost. So while I was there, like I started gravitating more towards security stuff, like admin the firewall, like played with checkpoint stuff, and there was started hanging out in hacker channels online, IRC. And there were two Microsoft, pretty lame Microsoft IIS vulnerabilities that came out that I had wrote a scanner for and an exploit tool for. And SensePost had just started, and Rulof, who was their CTO at the time, joined one of the hacker channels that I was on, talking about his scanner. And it was a scanner that I had written also. And so we started collaborating, and he said, listen, they're starting this company to do penetration testing. Like, will I come up and speak to them? And so I joined them. At the time, they were still working in Rulof's house.
Oh, wow.
And
so it was an early startup of SensePost, yeah.
Yeah. So there were 5 of them working in Rulof's house. And so I left and became the 6th person. And that was SensePost year 1. And then I spent 10 years at SensePost breaking stuff.
Yeah. It's you.
Most was fun.
You're pen testing and research?
Yeah. So we were such a small team that essentially at that point it was Rulof and I as the technical people. And so what we do is we do the pen testing, and the moment we found something interesting, we just live on it obsessively. And in year 2, we discovered that we could go to conferences if we put together a talk. And so we first did Rulof did SummerCon, and then we sent a submission to Black Hat. Used to actually have a Black Hat Windows show in New Orleans. And so we submitted a talk to Black Hat New Orleans, and it was awesome. Like we arrived in New Orleans and met David Litchfield and met Halva Flake and met Eric Burkholz, and it was crazy because like you've been reading these people for years and now you actually meet them. And from that point, we decided that, oh, we're going to show up like at every Black Hat there is. So we submitted, like literally we'd submit for every con. And I think from that year, like from 2002 till the year that I left SensePost, we presented it every Black Hat, every DEF CON without fail.
Yeah, I see that.
So we
you
made
did
sure.
Satiri in like
So that was our first talk.
in 2002.
Yeah, that was the first one, and that talk was interesting because we got to go there, and one of the things we used to offer training like what's pretty standard now, like here's how you break into the computers from the internet, and we used to offer this in South Africa, and when we got to Black Hat, we saw Foundstone giving a very similar course there, and so we said like, hey, we can give this course, like there's stuff we do, like we could teach this.
It was Foundstone Ultimate Hacking, right?
Yeah. So Foundstone had broken away from. Foundstone had done the Hacking Exposed books, and they were big with that. And so we were like, yeah, we do a version of this, but we do it our way. Like we teach people Perl and we teach people footprinting, and so we started doing that at Black Hat, and till today, SensePost still does a lot of training at Black Hat. So yeah, it was pretty cool and it was life-changing.
That's really awesome. You guys did a lot of offensive research in your time at SensePost, right?
Yeah, it was pretty great because like we the way we do it is like we'd be on pen test engagements and we were really small shop. And we did things, again, one of the surprising benefits of being part of the community but being away from the community geographically is that we got to figure lots of stuff out for ourselves, and some of that stuff not the same way as everyone else. So we used to hear people in the States or in the UK complaining about how on engagements they were very constrained and people were just telling them go after one IP address or go after two IP addresses. And like we had built this whole methodology just on footprinting companies. Like if we were doing a 4-week engagement, we'd spend 2 weeks footprinting the company, like mining DNS, figuring out extra networks. So when we first started talking to people at Black Hat, it was pretty clear that we were doing things differently. And yeah, we focused a lot on just building new tools, making new things. Like, yeah, one of the things about pen testing or security research in general is after you get a few wins, you get a little confident. And with confidence, you get to try new things and you get a little more confident. So it kind of ends up building on itself. And like at that point, yeah, we were on a tear. We were just doing stuff that we thought was interesting and fun. And we got to do it for a while.
I think I had you guys back on the show because you worked with Charles, right? In Roloff.
Yep, exactly right. And we were on first, I think, for our strike back stuff. We did the automatic network strike back.
Yeah, it was like honeypot kind of active defense stuff you guys were into for a little while.
Yeah,
there.
it does active defense stuff. Exactly right. So we did this whole talk on a whole bunch of like making DNS servers that attack footprinters or making a Metasploit shell that attacks someone, all of that stuff. And yeah, you were big into active defense at some point.
Yeah.
And you had us on the show earlier on.
Well, because we used to,
that stuff's old.
In 2015, you keep bringing back honeypots, which kind of segues into like what you do today. But like honeypot wasn't like just a new, you didn't just get up and decide I want to create a honeypot company. And the word honeypot, as we know, has like so many different meanings and is overloaded.
Right. Yeah, so in 2015, so for us in 2015, we had started, so I'd left SensePost.
Yeah. Wait, now what?
We had,
what makes you want to leave SensePost?
Why'd I leave?
Right, to do your own thing, or?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So by the end of it, I was like a director of SensePost, so it kind of was my thing. And Roloff had left, and so
Oh, so
like
Rolf was the founder, and he left SensePost.
yeah, so Roloff left a few years before that to start not Fortimo at the time. Roloff was doing Multigo.
I was going to say
So-
Rolf's
so-
Multigo. Yeah.
Yeah, so Roloff left to do Multigo.
Which gets back to your
and-
fingerprinting and mapping, which was pioneer around the
Exactly,
SensePost.
that's where-
So it seems like you all kind of found your passions and went, I want to go do this one specific thing. Yeah.
I want to go do this. Yeah, exactly right. So Roloff went to do that, and I stuck around a little bit. Like we still were doing good work. We were growing the team. At some point, like with pen testing, you start to feel like pen testing might not be the answer, and so I had two big thoughts on it for myself. The one was that I felt that like the offensive stuff, you almost always scribbling in the margin of other people's work. Like you do good stuff. It's sometimes it's great technical stuff, but it gets erased 2 weeks later and you start from scratch again. And that's really cool for a time of your life. It's really cool. You get to do fun stuff and you get to immerse yourself in it. But I wanted to build a product. Like I wanted to see if we could do something different. And I started to question whether pen testing was going the right way. And at the time, like when I just left SensePost, I did this talk called Pen Testing Considered Harmful. Because at least part of my premise at the time was that companies were starting to do pen tests really routinely. And so you'd get companies that just do it as a tick box item once a year, 3 times a year, 4 times a year. And it wasn't moving the ball forward appreciably. And my contention was that you could just about write most pen test reports without doing the engagement in it.
Yeah.
Like you
I love
have
your comment about like writing in the margins. That really resonates with me, Haroon, because I think you're right. And especially as it's applied to penetration testing, you've got the book, the script, and you're not following that exactly. You're like making these notes in the margin, like kind of changing things, pivoting off a little bit, but it's a sharp contrast to creating something totally new and building a company, which seems like you had the itch to do that.
Yeah, and you start to get the itch for that more and more. And I'll tell you, since then, like I thought about that a lot. And like there's several times that I look back now. It's kind of weird because like other people have asked me recently, and it's the sort of stuff you say as you get older and think about it more. Like one of I don't have many regrets. Like for almost everything, even flunking first year comp sci was actually quite great. But like I regret that I didn't start a product company sooner. Because like pen testing is addictive. Like a long time ago, Dave Vitale actually wrote a post about how, or someone who worked with Dave Vitale mentioned that like you get people that are compulsive problem solvers, and pen test companies basically pay you and give you a new problem every 4 weeks. And like that's heaven. Like you just keep solving them, and if you build a nice company culture, then everybody around you appreciates good hacks or good puzzles, and everyone appreciates it when you hit one out of the park. But at some point, you're just doing that, like you're just solving these puzzles. And one of the things that I was very aware of later on, two things that I thought were interesting. Like we had given 2 really good talks. Like one was Clobbering the Cloud, where we hacked a whole bunch of cloud services really early on. Like I think that was 2008 or 2009. And the thing was that
it was DEFCON 17 in 2009. You might have presented
yes
at Black Hat as well, probably.
Yeah, so we did Black Hat and DEFCON, and it was really nice work because like the cloud was just coming into its own, and what we did was we went for like, let's find a class of each of these problems in every of these new cloud services. So like we broke into MobileMe, and we broke into like stole from AWS, and like we did a whole bunch of stuff. But and it was really nice work. Like some of the talk stuff still holds up well. But like I think at almost the same time that was happening, Apple was building the iPhone. And if you read some of the books, like there's a book by Ken Kosienda called Creative Selection on how they built the iPhone. And again, it talks to that thing about building something with permanence. Like we did great work, and that talk was really nice, and we got our serotonin hit, and we went on stage, and it worked well for us. But at the same time, a group of people were working really hard, doing really clever hacks, and they kind of changed the shape of computing for the next 50 years. And so it becomes a thing that says, well, like you can keep doing this stuff that's clever and you get a talk out of it and maybe you change some stuff. But maybe if you build something, it'll be different. And even less gloriously than the iPhone, like for people like us who've been doing this for a long time, in the early 2000s, if you were on stage, like there was no Facebook yet, right? And we were on stage hacking some web app and talking about how PHP was bad, while Zuckerberg built Facebook. Right. And there's, like at some point you want to build something. And so I certainly had that drive. And inside of SensePost, we had tried building products a few times. But as a consulting company, it's really hard to build a product that has escape velocity. And especially if you're in an environment that rewards your hacks, pays you well for consulting, it's really hard to focus to build a product. And so Roelof left to do his, I left eventually saying, well, we sold SensePost in 2007. And so in 2010, I left and said, I want to build something. I didn't know what it would be yet, but I knew I wanted to build a product company. And so the thing that I wanted to do was to try to find out what product to build. And I said, I'll figure that out.
You didn't know what product. You just were like, I want to go build a product. I don't know what it is. I saw this iPhone thing. I saw this Facebook thing. Like, I got to go build something, but you didn't know what it was.
Yeah, so literally my take at the time was, like, I don't know what I want to build, but like I was pretty confident in that like we had good experience coming up. Like if you do pen testing well, and if you do it like the way we were doing it at the time, like you end up building tools on every engagement, right? So on every engagement, there's a problem, and you build something to overcome that problem. And so what I was betting on was that instead of building things to break in, I could build stuff to do good. And the feeling at the time was that I'm sure if we aim at the right problems with the same hackiness, we'd be able to hack stuff that's useful. But yeah, I didn't know what it was. And my theory at the time was that I was going to go to a handful of orgs and say to them, listen, I'll solve this problem for you. Like, I'll build a solution for this problem. And you get it cheap because I'm going to use you as customer one. But then I get to sell it to a whole bunch of people. And so that was the initial plan. And so we tried a few things. One was I tried a custom phishing. Like before it became every man and his dog had a fish yourself thing. We had Fish Me and Fish 5. And then it did pretty well. Like we had some big name customers, like I won't name customers, but it was doing hundreds of thousands of dollars in business, and we had good customers. But I didn't love the problem, and I was pretty convinced, probably incorrectly, that phishing would be a solved problem by the mail providers. I thought sooner or later Gmail, Office, and Apple would use the fact that it's not such an open space anymore. It's almost just a handful of mail servers. I thought that they'd fix phishing internally. But I also didn't love the problem. So we tried Fish 5 and that didn't.
Wait, so what did you do? You created a product, it generated some revenue, and then you're like, next. Like, what'd you do with it? Did you just shelve it, or
So we actually sold it.
Yeah.
No, so we were gonna shut it down. So I'll tell you how it actually worked. So we had. So I started. The first thing we sold was so we used to have a product called Thinkscape. So I started a product called Thinkscapes, which basically said I'd track all of the security conferences and pick talks that I thought mattered, and I'd summarize about 20 of them and say, like, listen, there were 200 talks this quarter, but these 20 were cool, and here's why I thought they were cool. Like, the stuff was based on, I'd read some people talking about, like, if you want to make products, one of the things you can do is sell your knowledge, like products are not products. And so the theory was, listen, like, people listen to me when I talk about security stuff, but that doesn't scale. So creating this report and selling it 4 times a year was one way to scale that. And Thinkscapes did really well for us. Like, we had a whole bunch of customers. So again, making a few $100K. But more interestingly, the people who signed up for Thinkscapes, and I'll come back to Thinkscapes in an odd way later. But people who signed up for Thinkscapes and bought Thinkscapes bought every product I ever made after that. And in part that's because they start to, whether they start to or whether it's already self-selecting, they think like you do. Like you select 20 of these talks and you're saying, listen, there's a zillion talks about that, but this talk talks about why this is going to be the problem. And so over the course of a few issues, like, those people think that the things that you think are important are important. And so if you build a product to solve a problem, chances are
they're going to think that's important.
they have that problem and want it. Yeah. And so Thinkscapes was really good. And with Thinkscapes, I then hired Marco from SensePost. So when I left SensePost, Marco replaced me as the head of research. And Marco was starting to get into the same, like, wanting to build something. And we had enough customers buying Thinkscapes. So I said to Marco, listen, like, why don't you come here? You do Thinkscapes, and I'll find the next thing that we want to work on. Because now Thinkscapes was making enough money to pay his salary. So Marco joined, started doing Thinkscapes. We bumped into the idea for Fish 5. We built it. It was doing okay. And Fish 5 has an interesting lesson for people who want to build product companies. It's not my lesson. It's totally a stolen lesson. Ev Williams, the founder of Twitter and originally Blogger, talks about, so he had done Blogger, and Blogger almost tanked, like he was sleeping under the table and all of that. And then he starts his second company, which is a podcast company. And it goes nowhere. And at some point he shuts it down, but with the staff there, they build Twitter, and Twitter takes off. And Ev wrote in a blog post at some point talking about how, like, we mythologize the struggling founder who has to struggle and sleep under the table and work nights. And he says one of the downsides of that is that people don't understand how hard or how easy it should be, because you think it's all got to be hard. And so, for example, when we did Fish 5, it was selling, but, like, we had to convince people that phishing was a problem and testing yourself like this worked, blah, blah, blah. And, for example, when we built Canary, like, in Canary's first 3 months, like, we already had heaps of customers who never knew of us. And for the first time, we went, oh, that's what traction feels like. Like complete strangers mailing you and saying, can we buy this? It's like, oh, that's what it's supposed to feel.
It shouldn't always feel like you're pushing the boulder up the hill.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the problems, like with any startup advice that people give, there's actually a really good article by the person who wrote Good to Great, Jim Collins, who talks about the genius of the ant. Yeah, the book's great, and he talks about the genius of the ant. He's saying, like, if you want to build a meaningful company, there's always this and that. Like, you don't get to choose. And the same thing happens, like, with all advice, right? Like, you've got to have this and that, and if you don't. But so in that case, yeah, like knowing actually what traction feels like, we felt it with Canary. And then, as luck would have it, like just before we released Canary, so we had started working on it, we were about to release it, and I met Doug Song in person for the first time at Black Hat, and Doug had breakfast with me, and Doug and them were marginally interested in two things that we were doing. One was the phishing tool, because for Geo they could use a phishing tool. And the other was Thinkscapes, because Doug really likes that sort of research and that sort of stuff. And so we were kind of flirting with each other at that point. And Doug said, interestingly, like, listen, are you guys going to always like come up with cool research projects, or are you going to hit one out of the park? And it's done. Like it's done. And I went back home. And we're like, yeah, actually, he's right. Like, we keep doing new stuff. Like, we keep building new things. And so we came back and decided to shut it all down. So we shut down Thinkscapes, mailed all those customers at the end of their subscription and said, look, thanks for the money. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to focus all in on Canary. We found a buyer for Fish 5 and let it go really cheap and just focused on Canary. Which, yeah, was great for us. It took off really well. And just to go full circle, just because it's kind of funny, last year we hired Jacob Torrey, who's this super great ex-DARPA PM, ex-AWS researcher. And one of his jobs is bringing back Thinkscapes and now giving it away free. And so we now release Thinkscapes, but we used to charge like $10,000 for it. We now give it away free because, again, we really liked it. Like, we thought it had genuine value. We just had to focus on Canary for a while. And so now that we can afford it and we're making money, we have someone smarter than us actually working with us to put out Thinkscapes again.
You had three business ideas in front of you at this kind of turning point. What was in your gut? Like, what made you go with Canary?
Yeah, it's so we did Fish 5 and we built it. Early on, I had a bunch of ideas that I thought were possible. One of them early on was a WAF, which sounds really obvious right now, but like I thought it could be done better. We had something around identity. I thought password resets over the internet were painful. And Canary was a very faint idea initially. And we actually got lucky because I had helped this company. I had hired their security team. And so the company had a lot of time for me. Like, I'd hop in and listen to them. And at some point, I had suggested to them, because they were this really massive network, and I'd suggested to them that they should take some of the interns and all the old desktops and set up honeypots on them and distribute them around their network. And I said to them, listen, like, you guys are so big, you don't know where you've got problems, like which country you've got problems in. And you've got interns that you want to train. So, like, put a honeypot on, put Snort on, distribute these things, and at least you'll get pointers to say, like, oh, we're definitely getting attacked in China. Like, oh, the Pakistan office is definitely in trouble. And so we told them to do it. I came back, like, I spoke to them 6 months later, and they still hadn't done it. And like, they still listened to me. Like, if I made a suggestion like that, they would have done it. And then a few months later, I was like, hey, did you do this? And it was, no, they still hadn't gotten around to doing it. And so I went back and I spoke to Marco and to Az and said, like, listen, like, this is really what these guys should have. Like, they've got such a big network. So they're currently busy firefighting everywhere, but they don't know where they've got problems. And these guys should deploy these honeypots, But because they're so busy, they're never going to do
Right.
it. And so
Well, and also
then
there's,
we said, well,
I mean,
hold on.
also still today, Haroon, there's people that have poo-pooed the honeypot idea because it could go wrong and attacker could actually get on the system. You got to monitor them and maintain. I mean, you've heard every single objection to a honeypot probably 100 times over.
Yep. Yeah, it's interesting because like at that point we said, so I was convinced, like, listen, this is what they need. Like they're busy fighting fires. New CISO's come in, he's built his team, and they're all fighting normal company fires. Like, patch this, do this, get budget, get people. But the simple thing is, they don't know where they're being hacked on their global network. And if they just did that first idea, which is like for 1 month, just get the intern to build whatever honeypots were out at the time, like take anything off the shelf, they'd get really positive indications that say, listen, you've got a problem on this segment. And the fact that they didn't do that, like for us, was like, listen, we should build this. And so at that point, we said, well, listen, like our starting off point was, this thing's got to be so easy to use that even these people would put it down. Like these people, because in my head, they trusted me, they were going to put it down. But even that little amount of work, which was put on BSD on a system and put on a honeypot and drop it, was too much for them. So we had to overcome that hurdle for them. And so we started with the thought, and then we mailed, I mailed 12 customers, 12 of our old Salesforce customers who I had a relationship with. But these are really like either customers or people who we'd met at conferences, and said to them, listen, if we built this and you could just drop it in, would you buy this for $5,000? And I'd like to tell you that the fairy tale is that all of them said yes, but most of them said no. But we were, for almost the same reason that you just mentioned. Everyone was like, I can build my own. I know about honeypots. Honeypots have their problems. But we were pretty convinced they were wrong. And so we said, okay, cool, we'll chat again. And we built the first 12. And we built these, we built them in like 3D printed cases, literally hand soldered them with an LED, but really simple. And so essentially you'd get these canaries that would report into a management console. And we did a bunch of cool hacksaw tricks to make sure that it was really quick to deploy. So like during setup, you want to establish crypto keys between the device and the console. Like the device would, during that process, you'd actually XSRF yourself so that you could get the key off the device and onto your console. And like we had the consoles work just over encrypted DNS. So if you just dropped it on a network, as long as DNS would exfiltrate, config stuff would exfiltrate to the console. So literally the first time you'd plug it in, it would go green and it would start working. And again, in part it was because we were thinking of that company saying, listen, if they have to configure it, if they have to make holes through firewalls, if they have to do that, it's going to be too much work and they won't. So we've got to lift all of that for them. And then we sent one of those to each of those 12 customers and said, listen, this is what we want to sell for $5,000. Would you buy it? And from them, 11 of them said yes. Most of them are still customers today. And we said, okay, like let's do that. And so then we started with Canary. We did the talk, the Bring Back the Honeypots talk, in part explaining our thinking on why we thought honeypots got a bad rep, shouldn't. And then at the time, we also released our free Canary token stuff. So where Canary was honeypots made easy, Canary tokens were honey tokens made possible. And you start to bump into an interesting thing, which is the gap between security researchers and building a product. For years, we gave people advice that said, use honey tokens, like do this, like just do this. And nobody was doing it. Like like vanishingly few people in the world were using it. And in part it's because you can conceptually know how to do a thing, but actually building the thing, making it reliable, knowing when the thing fails, making sure that all the infrastructure around it works,
it's the operational aspect of it, which has always been a contentious point in honeypots in deception technology.
Yeah, and so our whole take was, like, for us to win, we have to take those problems.
You remove the friction, increase the time to value. You're very well read on business and startup stuff. You mentioned good to great. Like, I guess my question really is like, how do we educate our industry to be as well read on strategies, tactics, and things? Because I've got some inside baseball there, right? Like, I know you really study and practice like how to run a product company, how to deploy a product, how to remove friction, right? Those are important things.
Yeah, it's a super good question, and it's I'll tell you again, like Doug, at Duo, Doug and Jono had a running mantra that was that they should engineer the company, and if you look at how they ran Duo, they treated everything as an engineering problem. So like how you get sales, how you increase marketing,
and there's a hacker spirit to them and you as well. And so many, right? You've used your hacker spirit, not even skills, but spirit.
It's totally, it's so for us, it's totally like I genuinely think that business, and it sounds trite and it sounds like I'm trying to make a talk title, is just a series of hacks also. Like, and I don't mean it as ugly hacks, but there's like, okay, so we made this thing, but nobody knows if it's real or not. Like, that's the problem you have to solve. And in the same way that you'd learn to hack a system, it's like, well, okay, how have other people who've hacked this before, how have they done it? Like, what worked and what didn't work? And so almost everything just becomes a series of like the term hacks has been abused by like the people who go growth hacks, I
hate that aspect of it too. You're right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but much to the original spirit of hacking that says, well, learn the system, learn what's the essence of the system, learn what you can get away with and what you can shortcut. Like, there's parts of it that I super enjoy, and like when it comes to building a product, like there are a few things that for us was super fun. And so like step one was like, can we build a thing that works? And then the thing that says, well, it's not real unless people use it. So like, okay, can you make it so that people use it? Can you make it so that it's easier to use? Can you make it so that it's friendlier? Like constantly looking for friction.
And looking for those shortcuts. You're right. Like I think about the problems I've solved to grow the company. It's a lot of it's shortcuts, right? Using your hacking skills to find those shortcuts to go, yeah, that's the long way. But if I were to hack it, like I go right here and find the shortcut.
Yeah. Like how can we do this without that? Like, how can we do this without 20 people? Like, how does this? And the good thing is, for most of those things, I'm a pretty firm believer that it leads you. If you do it right, you end up with solutions where both parties win. And so like we ended up with like, okay, we don't have a massive sales force, so we're gonna have to make this thing like on the one, like first you start off with the product, like it's got to work. Like, okay, you've got a working product, and now the question is, well, okay, how do we sell this? We don't have teams of salespeople. Okay, so if we don't have teams of salespeople, we're gonna have to start off by saying, listen, this thing's so cheap, try it. So you get into this thing that says, well, okay, you can't charge $100K for it because you don't have the people to make $100K sale. But what you do have is you can make it affordable enough to say, listen, try it. How bad can it be? And after a few people try it and say that it's not bad, then you can say to people like, hey, listen, these people like it. They say they like it. Like, why wouldn't you try it? It's
right, but you used hacks to reduce your overhead so that what you were creating didn't cost you a fortune, so you could sell it at that reasonable price. Again, these are like hacks and shortcuts that you strategically used to end up where you are. Yeah.
Sure. But like part of what I think is, and I was saying this to someone else fairly recently, like I think, so I can't remember who it was. There's someone who says that like building a bad company is hard, building a good company is hard. You might as well try to build a good company.
Yeah.
Like, and the same thing is like you're always gonna bump into stuff that needs hacks around, and the question is just whether you approach it from okay, we'll throw 100 people at that, or you go, well, we don't have 100 people. What are our options? And both are hard because if you get 100 people, you've now got the problem of having to manage 100 people, and you've got all of that pain that goes with it. Or it's an engineering problem and you've got to find an engineering solution to it. And that's also hard, but just different hard. And the co-founder of Square has a book out, and he talks about how when they launched, they didn't have any support. And he mentions it specifically. He's like, look, everyone else who did credit card stuff has a phone number that you can call. And he's like, but we didn't because we were too small. And so instead, they had to make the product so that you never needed to call them. And it's one of those things, for example. So like from very early in Canary, like Canary, I was going to say self-helps, but like the product has to be so simple that you can't get it wrong. And if there's times when something could be obtuse, like even in the program, it'll tell you like, hey, this is what we're offering you. Do you understand it? Like, here's a KB article explaining your two choices here. And if we put enough thought into the choices we make and to those explanations, then you don't need a support team of 50. And so like even now, like we've got like hitting for 2,000 customers, and we've got 3 people in support. Like people like our support. Like we've had customers write poems to our support people. But like in truth, like all of the stuff we do is built so that it's friendly enough and that you don't need support.
Yeah, I mean, you really focus on
and
usability, accessibility, adoptability as like the primary pillars, right, of building a product company.
Sure, and again, it becomes really easy to do the other stuff as a crutch. So one way to build a product is you've got huge bank balance and you just hire more people, and the people just churn out features. And so at that point, you can stand up and say, we do X, Y, and Z. And if anyone asks, do you do ABC? You throw 20 developers at it and you say, yes, we now do ABC. Except you've got this mishmash, and now customers are confused and some things don't work together. And instead, if you're really selective about what you go after and make sure that it all works, you spend more time on this, but then less time on support. And like what we were lucky with is, and I'll full on call it luck, is that when you are tiny, you can get crushed at that point with that strategy because you're doing a handful of things and bigger people can completely just copy you. And when we were small, the big guys were all racing to add features. And our early customers who used us went, yep, like I see that you don't do these other 10 things, but these are the 3 things that I need, so I'm going to use you. And it gave us a chance to catch up, again, still with the features that we think need to go in there. But yeah, at this point, we're in a pretty good space. Like there were, like early on, there were competitors who raised a whole bunch of funding. At this point, like we've outlasted a bunch of them. We've got more customers than most of them. Like I think we've got a viable strategy for building a useful product.
It's interesting, Haroon, like how important is it to have a free aspect to your product? And I'll give my answer. Right? I think it's super important. When I advise companies, I drive them towards, you got to find, to your point, easy, accessible way for someone to experience, even if it's a smaller aspect of your product. Because I think it's really important and very pivotal to everything else that you do. And you can come up with a ton of examples on that. But you also did that with with Canary tokens, right? Which isn't your product, but it's an adjacent, honey token, right? And that's important. That was important to your success.
Yeah, it definitely added to it. Interestingly, we did get a lot of customers initially going, hey, I used your Canary tokens, I want to try your product. And in part, we were very gentle on trying to upsell people. Like we know thousands, literally there's thousands of people who just forked the Canary token server, and we'll never hear from them. Like they and we've got like a tiny banner at the bottom that says like, if you like this, you'll probably like that. But most people will probably be blind to it. And so I won't say it did help us. It helped us in lots of ways, but not the way you'd expect. So I'll tell you, it helps you get good people. Like, good people want to work on stuff that matters, and you can go work on the menu for System 1 at some big company, and all you're doing is working on UX for that menu. Or you can come here, and when we have a cool idea, we'll build a token out of it, and 1 million people will use
It's very
your
rewarding
and
for people working on a team. Yes.
Exactly. So there's a reward that way. And then we've certainly bumped into customers where we walk in and they go, oh no, I use your tokens. I want to see what this is. Let me see what it is. But for us, there was a genuine, like in retrospect, lots of people will say it, but we didn't think of tokens as like, here's a loss leader, like people will do this and then they'll come into that. At the time, we didn't know how to monetize it. Like, there was a thing that says like, listen, like, how would you, like you're making this token and it's a tripwire and you can mint 1,000 of them. Like, do you charge people 5 cents a token? Like, do you charge? And we're like, well, we don't know, but it's useful.
But you don't want to do it.
And
You don't want to. You and both though. You
useful.
don't want to do that because then I'm going to go up. I don't want 100 tokens. I only want 50 because I don't want to pay. And now I'm not using your product as much as I should be using your product.
Yeah, so there's just lots of like it was a messy part of the problem, and it was like, well, let's not get stuck on it. Let's let people use it, and there's a genuine thing there that said like, listen, Canary's making us money. Like, we're starting to get real money from it. We can afford to give this away, and maybe along the way we'll figure out a different way to charge for it. And if we do, we do. And even today, like I mentioned a few times, but like when Log4j happened, like we had a token that was useful for testing. And so like in December, like 3 million people used the Log4j Canary token. And like from our side, it's just like, hey, that's cool. Like people got to use it. Like DHS had Canary tokens on their website, which was cool. But like in the company, we still treat tokens as a first-class citizen. So like on the one hand, keeping it up. On the other, just inventing new tokens. Like someone periodically goes, when Jacob Torrey joined us, like he was with us for a month and he went like, hey, like we could do this. And we're like, cool, let's build a token out of that. And so for us, it helps build the spirit in the company that we want, which is one of invention. Like yes, we could invent a good detection here. And so even if we weren't monetizing it, it gives us that. But it's also like super useful. Like we've got customers. So if you a paid Canary customer, you get a Canary token server bolted on there. So not your public one, you get your own one. And we've got a customer, we've got several now, but like one of the big social media houses, they've got something like 20 Canaries. So they pay us like $20,000. But the last time I checked, they had north of 600,000 tokens. And for us, it's fine, right? Because every token is free. And so again, like someone might wonder like why we do that. And the short answer is that customer's not going to churn any times. Like we get 20K from them. They love us. They're going to use that thing forever. Like, why wouldn't we want that? Like that just makes good business sense. And I think at the moment, like it actually leads me to a happy soapbox because I'm just back from RSA. I think fundamentally for us, you mentioned like we focused on the product, and even without like reading about it and strategy about it, fundamentally we want the product to work. Like people hire us for a job which is solve this problem. Like I don't know when people break into my network. And like what we've been very lucky about is the whole company is shaped around that as the flag. And so whether it's support or customer success or even the way we do our finances, like when we do our legals, when we do all of that, everyone knows the main thing is how quickly can we solve this problem for the customer. And the reason why I say we're lucky is that as companies grow normally, you start to see different goals in the company. And some of those goals are perfectly valid. Like you'll get people going, well, how can I solve our big data problem? Like we're getting lots of alerts, like how can I solve this? And you build expertise, but after a while, the problems you are solving are the company's problems, not the customer's problems. And so you end up with real excellence in the company that never materially matters.
So, but it sounds like, Haroon, something that is
focus
interesting in what you said is that your culture is not just around your employees and your company and your product, but your customers are first. That culture that you've been describing, right? Like taking notes on what the culture is like at Thinkst is really very customer. The customers are part of your culture.
So we focus crazily hard on it, and I'll tell you for two reasons, and one of them may be a throwback to like when we built our first Canaries and we got our first 10 checks for it. Like a part of you just goes like, holy shit, like people pay, like we built this
Someone
thing,
likes it. Like,
like that's incredible. Yeah. I remember reading someone say that like the first time someone pays you for a product you've written, like you'll never be the same. Like it's and like for us, on the one hand it was awesome. On the other, like at the time there were just 5 of us, but there was a genuine deep sense of responsibility that said, holy shit, like so and so at this company trusted us. Like we can't drop the ball on this. Like this thing. And then as time goes by, like for example, people say that we're easy, people say that we're cool, and Bob's company just bought us, but because Bob's company is running this crazy config, we weren't easy. And then everyone in the company is like, holy shit, like we said we'd be easy, but we weren't easy for Bob. Like we got to fix that. Like that can't be. And it's perfect. It's a perfect segue for RSA. And so I'll tell you, like a few months ago, and this is a complete rant, but I'll totes go there and you can edit it out later. A few months ago, we needed to get EDR on our Macs. Like the company now has like 35 people.
Well, wait, you only have 35 people on your team?
Yeah, we're still super tiny. And part of our thing is part of it has been that, right? That says you don't have to grow just for growing's sake. And like at 35 currently, with nearly 2,000 customers, we're not creaking at the knees. Like we grow when we need to. Like we pretty like we'll keep hiring, but it's not like, oh, now we really need to hire. Like we could.
And you've not taken any funding. 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 Oh, they're happy.
No funding, and like we super profitable, and like customers are happy. So like
you're like the most special unicorn. We talk about unicorns in a different light, but I do this before, right? But just having you describe it, like for our audience, like you really need to recognize, like that's a very special unicorn. That doesn't happen in any industry really very often, right? I think that's really cool.
And it feels good. It feels good, and it feels sustainable because like early on, like super early on, when we had like 100 customers and there were just 5 of us, you could see like it was like we'd say, sure, take leave whenever, but like there's 5 of us. Like if someone goes on leave, 4 other people are sweating. Like, but like now at 30 people, like we have full adult paternity leave. Like someone has a kid and they get 4 months of leave. Like it's like we can take leave and all of that. And it's reasonable and sustainable. And all of it brings me to this point, which is we needed EDR on Macs because we mainly a Mac shop. And so we went out and said like, okay, like we said to the two of the guys like, hey, listen, go pick the best EDR, the one that sucks the least, and let's roll with it. And they are terrible on Macs. Like there's just no great EDR solution on Macs. And I was surprised a little bit by how bad the state of Mac EDRs still are. Like I expected.
Well, because there's some that are. There's a few that I think I talked with Patrick Wardle about this. I'm like mudging his name, right? I think it was Patrick made that distinction between those that just kind of like, oh yeah, I'll go off and I'll compile the Windows version like for Mac kind of thing, versus those that have a native Mac version. So now you've taken the entire EDR market, right, and basically cut that by 80 or 90%, and like those aren't going to even have a prayer of warning.
So yeah, it's so I'll tell you that I have a few thoughts on it. So they're terrible, right? And so I tweet about it. I tweet saying like I can't believe the stuff is still so terrible. Like I expected the stuff to be terrible 10 years ago, but we've got some big names with tens of millions, at least hundreds of millions of VC money invested in them. Like fixing the Mac EDR is not a $100 million.
And it's an enterprise play. I mean, you go to any enterprise today, you and I both know, they ask you want a Mac or you want a PC, right? It's very different than 10, 20 years ago.
And sure. And like we had a bunch of people respond to that tweet from like popular EDR vendors saying like, hey, you should try us. And like in some instances, like I was too polite to say we did try you, and like you put two icons in my application saying that do nothing. Like I click on them and literally there's no UX. But the thing that's most interesting to me is if you go to RSA, those people have massive ass booths, right? And their website talks about features of the product, and people replied to me on their Twitter thread saying, listen, like vendor X says all this on the website, but they don't do it yet. Like they're gonna do it in 6 months. And like you go to RSA and there's this massive booth and there's a massive stall and there's t-shirts and there's fanfare.
And they're all
like,
talking about
like
I don't know, did you get this analogy? They're all talking about mushrooms and fire flowers. Do you get the Super Mario suits? Everything you need to know about marketing is from Super Mario Brothers. So Super Mario, right? You start off as little Mario, and as you go through the game, every time you get a mushroom or a fire flower, you get bigger and bigger until you can fly and shoot balls of fire, right? Now, the analogy is your product is the mushrooms and the fire flowers. Your customer is Mario. What people talk about is how great the mushrooms and the fire flowers are, not how awesome you will be able to fly and shoot balls of fire, right? So when you're marketing, talk about how your customers are going to fly and shoot balls of fire.
But I'm with you, but my point here is not even that their marketing's bad. My point is that they must know that the product is bad. Like the way when I said to you that it was broken, you nodded, and everyone who replied to that tweet knows. Why aren't the vendors fixing it? Like somehow they've ended up being okay putting out a product that they know isn't right, and instead focusing on all this RSA hoopla and all this marketing and all this stuff. And you can see what's happened. At some point in the company, they focused on all this other stuff. And all this other stuff is rolling, and like people are buying the product. And so this other thing just isn't that important anymore. Like, is it actually working? Are customers actually liking it? Like, it doesn't matter because you can sell by getting onto Gartner's quadrant, or you can sell by more airport ads. And And so, like, fundamentally, I'll tell you a super stupid thing for that is if you go to most of the vendors at RSA, you don't see lots of them demoing. And more than the people demoing, again, Doug used to talk about how many companies do you know where, like, Apple gets a lot of stick for a lot of stuff, but like, how many companies do you know where the CEO demos the product and can demo it meaningfully? Like one of the things that were magic about Apple under Jobs is that he genuinely cared about button placements in his app. So Doug mentions like how many CEOs can meaningfully demo the product, and one of the things that was magic about Apple under Jobs is that he deeply cared about the product. Like you see him care about it, and like without sounding horrible, like do you think? And I'll take names that aren't useful now. Do you think the CEO of Symantec was interested in how clunky the config window for Symantec endpoint agent was? Like you start to see this thing where in security, companies or the company builds itself away from thinking that the product and the user matter. Like does the CEO of Palo Alto currently care on how their integrations work? And one of the cool things, again, about Apple as a role model is when you talk about the stuff, people immediately go, well, that's okay. You can do it when you're a small company. And of course, Jobs was doing it at, I guess, the biggest company in the world, at least for a certain amount of time. And so I think there are things that we assume don't scale, but just don't scale in the way people were doing things. So like this thing that says, build this product, okay, you've got traction, pour VC money on it, get salespeople, like talk about it en masse, market en masse. And I think what we super believe in, and so far, like are getting to show for some value, is that if you care enough about the product and you care enough about the customer, then you don't need that other stuff. That you can do it and you can build around this and you can still win. And yeah, for the most part, that's our hope.
You've been very purposeful with culture. How much you put a lot of effort into culture, right? And that's an ongoing thing. I feel like maybe more so than some other founders.
Yeah, so I think so we do like we try hard, and again, what we were very lucky with is that all of our early people totally believe the same thing. And look, there's a few things that say, like, if you take on people, and if you then have to change the company to hit new levels, then in a way it doesn't matter if you hit those levels because you're not the company you wanted to build. And so for us, like there are a few things that we really want. Like, we want to make customers happy. We want to learn. And so for all of those things, like, if you're lucky, you get an early team that supports it. And then as new people come in, they get pulled into that culture. But like a discussion we have really often is making sure that we are the company that we want to be. Because I think it's easy to lose yourself. And like, people assume because of stuff I said in the past that I'm anti-VC, and I'm not. Like I think in some instances, and for some VCs, they'd align with you. But one of the benefits you have if you don't raise VC money is that you can aim people around the same thing. Like when I say we all are aimed around building the product and making the customer happy, for lots of companies, that's a means to an end. Like, you've got to show enough product win to get your next round of funding, or you've got to show enough customers so that you can IPO. And so in all of those cases, your customer is a means to an end. They're not making the customer happy and making the product win is not really what you want. And like for us fundamentally, if we get to whatever goal, like 10 jillion people or 10 gazillion dollars, but we're not solving the problem and we're not making the customer happy, then that's not what we want to build. Like we want to solve the problem. We want to learn stuff. We want to do cool stuff. So yeah, like the company culture is important, and we super focused on, at the end of my time at SensePost, I couldn't do SensePost anymore. Like I was also tired. Like running a consulting business gets tiring. Like, so this time we were very deliberate about making sure also that it's more sustainable. Like we shouldn't be burning people out ridiculously. It should be good for people. They should be learning. They should be growing. So yeah, so far, touch wood, it seems to be working.
So what's next for Thinkst? I mean, it seems like you've always been on a steady trajectory in not losing sight of your goals, which that's cool.
It's been pretty cool so far. What's next? There's a few things. So we still think there's lots of room for Canary to grow, and that sounds trite and obvious, but like in terms of Canary's customers, at the low end we have like a 2-man shop using it, and at the high end, like we've got multiple countries that have done like countrywide deployments, like someone with more than 1,000 Canaries, and part of why that's interesting to mention is that we genuinely believe everyone should have Canaries. And I don't just mean to make us fabulously rich. I mean, like part of our logic is that if you're a big org and you've got tons of security projects this year, just like our first customers, like you've got tons of things, you want to work on this, you got a cloud migration, you got this, take 10 Canaries, it'll take you 5 minutes to deploy them today. If they never go off, they'll never bother you, and you're fine. But if they do go off, they're going to change your other plans, because you're going to find out that something that you thought was sorted is not sorted. And if you're a 4-man law firm and you've got a Canary on your network, like when someone's browsing around, you might not know what to do with it. But like if you get at 2 a.m, someone just mapped to the server and copied salaries.xls, you need to call in a security team to do incident response. And you didn't know that yesterday, but now you absolutely know you need to do that. And so one step is we think Canaries need to be everywhere. Like Canaries and Canary tokens, we want
Does that
to
mean
be
people
everywhere.
have them in their remote offices with everyone working from home?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So we've seen that happen. We've seen people deploying them at home. Like and so that becomes a viable thing. Dropping tokens in bunches of places. So the one is like Canaries for the masses. And then like we've been really fortunate because as we've grown, we've become like, even though there's just 35 people, we've now got thousands and thousands of servers and lots of devices in the wild. And so we now run into questions of, well, how do we secure our servers at scale? Like, how do we consume external APIs and use them securely? So we start to bump into security problems that most customers will have in a few years now. And so in solving those problems for ourselves, we hopefully get other interesting problems that'll become security products tomorrow. And so, again, for that part, we super focused on, well, can we make a product out of this? Like, can we build this thing to solve our problem? Because chances are other people are going to have this problem also. And so that's something that we get to do. And we're hopeful that along the way, we'll find other problems that need solving with our hacky sort of solutions. And then the last thing, like I mentioned, we made a full circle and went back to Thinkscapes. But there's a bigger portion of that says, like with Jacob, and we've just hired someone else that we'll announce shortly, hired into Thinkst Labs, we feel we can start doing some of the security research that we originally cut our teeth with, but again, in our way, focused on pushing the ball forward. And so we're pretty excited that we can now fund some of that stuff and get more ambitious with that sort of thing. And yeah, that's just kicking off. So for the most part, like at this point, we happy and doing cool stuff.
Thinkscape is something that people can get free today?
Yes. If they go to thinkst.com/TS, I think we've put out like 3 issues already. So yeah, thinkst.com/TS, you'll get like the last N conferences that we thought were worth it. There's even a short audio summary version, and it's completely free.
Haroon, what's your favorite hacker movie?
Man, you always throw questions right at the end.
I gotta throw something at you.
So everyone loves hackers. I had deep love for sneakers. I'm trying to remember if there's another movie which is unconventional, but I still think of as a hacker movie. I think everyone remotely our age grew up on MacGyver, and I think MacGyver was a regular series.
It
of
was.
hacks.
I haven't watched MacGyver since I was little, right?
Yeah, and you watch some of them. They hold up pretty well. Like they're not bad. They make you want to buy a Susami knife again, but it holds up pretty well. And you can see how I suspect some of that stuff imprinted on our minds. I'll go with sneakers for now, just because it's slightly more.
Haroon, it was wonderful talking with you. Thank you for appearing on Hacker Heroes.
It was super cool. Thanks so much, man.